Madam Speaker, the world is unfair, that's just tough. You're born in China, you're born in Singapore, you're born in America. You lead different lives because you are born into different circumstances. That is just the way the world works. You don't have a choice as to where you want to be born. If I was an African and I wanted to choose where I would be born, I would not choose to be born in Africa because it's a shitty place. And it's a place where, you know, obviously things have not gone well. Obviously we've pumped in $500 billion since 1970 and it has not gone to any benefit, except for certain African countries which have done well based on oil, etc, etc. But other than that, the continent of Africa is more or less in the doldrums. Now, let me bring up 2 points of contention that I have with this side government in this debate today. First of all, are we directly or even indirectly responsible? And I'll show you why that seems ridiculous in the first place. And second of all, whether or not making people not buy extravagance is actually going to solve anything. But first of all, or whether or not we are either directly or indirectly responsible. Now, obviously we are not directly responsible because the responsible ones in the more or less the first place is basically the African government. We have already established that. But are we or are we not indirectly responsible? And we say, ladies and gentlemen, on our side of the house, obviously not. Because what government is coming up to tell us is that we are responsible for the deaths of Africans because we do not give enough money to bribe the African government to allow the charities to go into the country and so-called make a difference. Now, we are not, let me reiterate, we are not responsible because we're not paying enough money to bribe the governments of Africa. Now, is that even our responsibility in the first place? And we say, ladies and gentlemen, no, because on our side of the opposition, we say that the biggest problem today in Africa is the African government. And if we were really morally responsible, it would be a moral obligation to stop these governments from causing such chaos in their country, to stop these governments from mistreating their people, and to stop these governments from exacting corruption on their country. But now let me move on secondly, yes.
But you do concede that if you could deal with corruption through money, then obviously we help in some way, and thus by not doing anything about it, we are more responsible, right?
Now, as the first speaker Ruben had come up and said, basically moving to putting more money into corruption is not the way to move things forward. And while it is not a moral responsibility to fund corruption in that sense, because if we keep giving money to corrupt dictators of these countries, then basically what kind of moral obligation is that? Because it is not anybody's moral obligation to fund corruption in that way, even if the end means is to push a charity into another country, into a country to so-called help the people. Sit down. We say that is not the way we want to be going in terms of charity. But now, second of all, or whether or not actually making people not indulge in extravagance actually allows them, makes them to go and donate. Now we say that just because you have the money and just because you don't spend that money on some form of extravagance or another, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to donate that money to an African charity. Now, I put forth to you that people in America, people in America have problems of their own. People in America see that there are 2 to 3 million people who are homeless in America every day and every year, and we see that when you talk about the fact that they can use their own money to exact change in their own society, when they can actually see that change in their own society, that this money in fact they feel will be put to better use in that sense versus putting to help Africans thousands of miles away in which they don't see any tangible benefits. But now having dealt with that, let me move on to my substantive on the nature of charity. No, sit down. Well, as Ruben has said that basically I would say, the nature of charity is altruistic, and what that means is basically it's up to the individual to decide, first of all, whether or not he or she will donate in the first place, and second of all, how much is it that he or she is going to donate. Now, just because I don't donate blood, does it mean that when a person, or when a motorcyclist crashes and dies because of a lack of blood, that I am responsible for him dying? That is not the case, because we see that basically, we're talking about the act of altruistic giving. Basically, it is a personal decision, and a decision that is made based on your abilities, even especially in the form of money. But now, basically, the next thing we don't do is we don't qualify a person's donation based on the amount he or she gives. Whether a person gives $1 or $10,000, basically it is up to himself or herself, and more often than not is based on his or her ability. And we say that when we don't in fact choose to do this, basically we leave it up to the person's choice, and we leave it up to the person's choice whether or not they want to donate and how much they want to donate. Now, basically, a person has the right to decide whether, in the best interest of himself or herself, and that is in the form of how much he or she chooses to donate, or whether or not he or she chooses to donate in the first place. Now, we see that while they are trying to argue that people have a moral obligation to other people, we say that they have moral obligations to themselves, because they have to they have to prove to themselves whether or not this money is justified in their eyes, and this money is basically in the idea that they need to donate. Now basically at the end of the day, the people have the right to choose to donate whether or not in that sense. And basically, we don't have a right to put an obligation on them just because we say that they are not doing the right thing, so to speak. Just because we say that they are not donating to the Africans when we think they should be donating to Africans. This responsibility is not something that we as the government can put on them. And we believe that we should not put this responsibility on them, because not only does it defeat the entire purpose of charity, basically it makes that person, it puts an added burden on that person in terms of donations. Now, what we also have to look at in terms of charity is what this money means to this person, and whether or not this person in fact feels that this money is warranted. So what we have shown you today on the side of the opposition is basically that the responsibility is not on the people, and in fact is on the African governments to basically stop their corruption, and we need to help them in that regard, as opposed to helping them fuel corruption, which is basically in terms of donating more and giving more money to the governments. Second of all, that the nature of charity is defeated by basically putting this moral obligation on people to donate to these so-called starving Africans. And we have shown you in this case that basically the responsibility or the indirect or direct cost is not put on the people in first world countries, and we believe this motion must fall.